Welcome to GlobalPolicyCast, a podcast which opens the inner workings of international governance through conversations with those who have shaped policy from insight to impact. Hosted by Insights International with its co-founder Arpit Chaturvedi and Suresh Kumar, a career civil servant with nearly 40 years of implementing policy on the ground. Global ideas, real governance. Welcome to Global Policycast.
What happens when two Punjabi bureaucrats sit together and discuss revenue and taxation policies in the state of Punjab? There are a lot of interesting discussions, agreements, and disagreements in this very interesting episode of Global Policy Cast. Here, Mr. Suresh Kumar and I sit down with Mr. Virendra K, Garg, retired Indian Revenue Service officer, former Joint Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and former advisor with a Minister of State designation in the state of Punjab. This is a discussion where I more or less take a back seat and let the bureaucrats respectfully and admirably lock horns and debate it out about state-centered tax relations and India's larger tax policies. It is a treat to listen in, especially the nitty-gritties would be very interesting for the financial policy wonks. So listen on in this episode of Global Policy Cast. Thank you so much, Mr. Garg, for joining us on the Global Policy Cast. And today our discussion is focused on something which is very important for India. Most of the countries are struggling with issues of fiscal stress. And I just wanted to ask you, just to set the stage for our audience, that what is currently, the fundamental taxation problem in India? Is it, or what is currently the fundamental core of the fiscal stress in India? Is it fundamentally a taxation problem, or is it expenditure management? Or what is it? Especially given the oil crisis is going, there are so many theories coming about talking about that this is basically a cause of major fiscal stress. Some people say it's trade, some people say it's taxation. What, in your opinion, is the core of it?
You're talking in the very late context, or you're talking for the last few years?
I'm talking generally first.
See, to get the thing into context, India's total expenditure for both center and state governments is about 28% of the GDP.
Yeah.
And our tax to GDP ratio is about 18%. And there are other revenues, which is about 2.5%. And we end up having a deficit of about 8%. Now, this is the broad numbers. Now, if you take, for example, the taxation ratio, it has improved over the years. We are nearly operating at the highest ever ratio of tax to GDP ratio, despite having brought down the tax rates. Our corporate tax rates are lower than what they were, let's say, 10 years back. Sure. Our GST rates are lower than what they started with. And our customs tariff rates are lower than what they were. Personal income tax rates had gone up for the rise, and that had also been brought down to that extent. So on the taxation front, things have improved on an overall basis. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot more to be done in terms of the manner in which we collect taxes, the extent of evasion, ease of compliance, and many of those kind of things are definitely there. Yeah. On the expenditure side, there are lots of issues, because the popular perception will be the welfare spending, or you can call it freebies, have drastically gone up over the years. So it's not only the total expenditure which has grown over the years, it is the quality of the expenditure. So what percentage of that expenditure is going into revenue? And then within revenue, how much of that would be going into, let's say, payment of interest, pension, salaries, what you call committed expenditures, or freebies.
Sure.
So I would say that a majority of the problem, maybe 2/3 of the problem, is related to expenditure, and maybe about 1/3 of the problem is relating to the taxation side.
And when it comes to expenditure, sir, this is almost become a race to the bottom for political parties in many ways to spend as much as they can to be politically viable. Do you think in many ways one could frame it as, consuming in the present at the expense of the future?
Definitely. At least there are quite a few state governments who have literally pledged the future revenues, and they have borrowed even against that to that extent. But India may not come out to be probably the worst example in the world.
Okay.
So, there are phases in which India has done very bad. There are phases when India has tried to improve. Like, for
Yeah.
example, for the last year or two, they are trying to cut down deficits, contain expenditure also to a certain extent. Freebies are being better directed. Now, if you take, for example, freebies 20 years back or even 10 to 15 years back, there were far greater leakage in those kind of things. So those issues remain in an underdeveloped country like India.
Hmm.
So those issues are there. There are political parties who are trying to become popular or win elections, offering
Yeah.
all kind of those kind of incentives.
Yeah.
But if you take the macro picture, those things haven't drastically worsened, except for a few states. Individually, there are states, but if you take, for example, all the states in center put together,
Yeah.
let's say the capital expenditure ratios are more or less intact, more or less. The welfare
And
spending is higher.
And you feel that the recent, you mentioned the corporate tax cuts and there were revisions in the GST slabs, etc. What is the extent of their contribution to either increasing revenue or just generally improving macroeconomic parameters?
Each has impacted the economy in different ways. Now, first of all, let's understand what is the global model to attract investment and therefore
Sure.
improve employment and manufacture made in India and those kind of things.
Yeah.
The model is generally, like most countries are following this, and Trump has been lately doing it to rest of the world. Reduce the income tax rates so that
Hmm.
people bring investment into your country.
Yeah.
Reduce the customs duties on raw materials and components.
Sure.
Increase the duty on the finished goods so that goods cannot come from the other states.
Sure.
And if you feel that the consumption in a particular area is not picking up, then reduce the GST rates also to that extent. Now, India had tried to do all of these. In
Yeah.
2019, for example, they cut down the corporate tax rates drastically in September.
Yeah.
So at that time, if you recall, new manufacturing, the tax rate had come down as low as 15% plus surcharges and cess. In any
Yes.
case, even the rate today is 25% or so.
Yeah.
So the idea was if you set up in India, you can repatriate a much greater portion back to your own country, or you can use it for your own needs. So
Yeah.
that continued.
Yeah.
On the customs tariff side, the customs revenue to GDP ratio is today less than half of what it was, let's say, 8 or 9 years back. We used to
Sure.
collect about, I think, 1.5% of the GDP. Today it is 0.7. We have been
Sure.
cutting down the customs tariff, and they will further come down after the kind of agreements that you got into.
Yeah.
GST rates, as you know, were reduced from last September,
Yes.
and initial numbers were down. The government estimates were also fairly high loss of revenue.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that kind of drastic fall in the
Sure.
latest numbers. So hopefully, even if the economic activity has not greatly picked up, because something else worsened. When we
Hmm.
cut down the corporate tax rates, COVID started.
Yeah.
And then the Russia-Ukraine war, and then our own war, Operation Sindoor, and now the Iran war.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the whole world has become alive to tariffs. So India has been a little unfortunate
Yeah.
that other things did not remain constant.
Right.
So we have not really done as well as we had thought it to be, but
Hmm.
probably we have been able to contain the fall that could have happened had these changes not happened.
Yeah.
But our tax to GDP ratio hasn't come down despite the cuts. That is only possible if the economic activity had picked up. And as you know, our GDP growth is now touching close to 8%, 7.5%, 8%.
And so the tax to GDP ratio not coming down, what would you primarily credit it to? Is it just greater enforcement, or is it just more people, coming into the taxable bracket, or what is it?
See, more people coming into the taxable bracket, I think we could discuss it separately. That depends upon the kind of tax.
Yeah,
Sometimes more people coming into the tax net.
will not
In
change
fact,
much.
at least in the GST context, they can even reduce tax. I'll explain that
Okay.
separately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But definitely, it seems that the compliance has improved. The government has done a number of steps for the last 20 years or so. PAN related things are there, TDS, TCS, many of those things are there.
Yeah.
Digital technologies have come. In
Yeah.
GST, as you know, invoice matching has come, which has improved quite a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So definitely this is because our what you call, revenues, taxes are growing faster than the GDP. So on one hand, you have the reduction of rates,
Yeah.
and then even then the taxes are growing higher than the GDP. It has to be then compliance. Otherwise, it would be also reflected in the GDP numbers.
And does that thing worry you, that taxes growing higher than the GDP growth? Do you think that that would eventually become too much of a burden on, just general economic growth? Will it be a dampener on it eventually?
No, you've seen that this growth has come and the government has been reducing the tax rates over the years. They've cut down custom, they've cut down GST. So
Yeah.
there were sizable deduction, this thing, deductions.
Right.
GST, for example, I think the internal estimates are that government has sacrificed close to 1,50,000 crores of revenue in terms of the cuts.
Yeah.
Corporate tax also, if you take, for example, these cuts came in 2019.
Yes.
My guess will be if you take the picture of the corporate tax of 2018-19, which was at full rates, vis-a-vis 2021. 19 was mid-year. So if you
Yeah.
take 2021, I
Yeah.
think the corporate tax to GDP ratio had come down very drastically
Right.
immediately thereafter. Then it picked up later, and today's ratio will be more or less same as the ratio, for example, in 18-19.
So please help me understand this, that at one end you're saying that the tax rate, the growth of the tax rate is greater than the growth of the GDP. At the same time, corporate tax and other taxes are coming down. And you're saying that a lot of it is due to stronger enforcement. What I struggle to understand over here is that will greater enforcement of some of these tax collection methods eventually create sort of a hurdle for, or is it going to be eventually in the long run a dampener for the growth? And seem to take
Arpit,
it.
I'll come at this stage.
Yeah.
We can note thanks for coming on the podcast and kind of taking time to answer a few queries. See, one common perception about the tax system is the tax system is too complicated, the tax policies are not up to the mark. And this is what is coming out of the discussion. GDP is rising. GDP growth numbers, you said it's reaching 8%. And since 1992, we've been saying the India's growth story is such that the GDP numbers have improved substantially. And the growth has improved substantially, particularly the financial sector. Collection of taxes, everybody claims, is improving. Post GST, even prior to GST, both indirect and direct taxes, they are improving. Tax you just mentioned, the tax rates are down. But still, the tax to GDP ratio is high. The fiscal stress is still talked about. How is it that the growth is rising, all other fiscal numbers are improving, but still the country is fiscally stressed? The common man's perception is the tax policy is not right, the tax system is not right, or something is wrong with the somewhere. Do you think it's a systemic flaw? It's a policy flaw? Or it's an enforcement issue? What's your take on this? Either the system, there is something missing. Yeah.
First of all, people tend to believe as if better enforcement or stricter enforcement brings more taxes. But I did never say that. First of all, the design of the tax itself does some amount of self-policing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to design the tax in a manner that the compliance is inbuilt into that design.
Sure.
You can have a design which leads to evasion. You can have a design which leads to self-policing. Look at the GST design.
Yeah.
This is one country where all invoices from the supplier are being verified at the buyer's end. And every credit that is taken on this invoice gets automatically validated today within a period of 2 months. So fly-by-night operators automatically go away. You don't have to enforce it through manual efforts or human efforts.
Yeah.
It is a part of the design itself.
Yeah.
Now, if your sales are being booked properly, if your purchases are being accounted for properly, there is a very high chance that your profits are getting accounted far better than they were getting accounted in any other manner. The high purchases of any individual have to be accounted from at the other end. See, earlier the tax was being collected from the taxpayer's end. Today, a lot of information is flowing automatically from the other end. So the department is able to more or less self-populate help automatically populate your return to a certain extent. Now, in GST, for example, every month, everybody gets to know by the 14th of the month what credits are you eligible for.
Correct.
I don't have to say anything to the department. Department tells me this is your eligibility. Now, if I try to take more than that, there is a very high chance that I'll end up getting a notice. So I'm very careful. And they will also tell you that these are the credits you are not eligible for. This is for vehicle purchase. This is a hotel expense, this and that. If there is a change in trend, they will get a notice. So these are the kind of steps which I would not say is human enforcement. These are design enforcements. So they have given you a better tax to GDP ratio with reduced rates.
Sure.
But VK, what you're saying basically means that the tax designs, particularly the GST tax design, is such that the compliance burden has been kept to the minimum. This is what it means. If the tax design is so, why do people still feel the tax?
There are lots of issues in the implementation of the GST. For example, there are 25 lakh notices people have given because things have not been reconciled. So government had, for example, incompetent or inadequate reconciliation system in the initial years, and people straight away jumped to AI-based techniques, which produced mechanical show cause notices, of which 98%, 99% are automatically getting dropped today. For 3 years, literally, the tax departments were not functioning due to COVID. So government extended the dates for the issue of show cause notices. So as soon as the economy opened, let's say in 23 or so, you have to issue no notices for the last 5 or 6 years in a matter of 1 year. So 23, 24, there was hue and cry because you are getting demands continuously for now 5 or 6 years, had to be covered in a period of 2 years. You didn't have the wherewithal to do that. That has begun to settle now. So in 23 to 25, we were trying to cover up the backlog of audits, enforcement, demands, notices, adjudications. All these things are there in the statute. So some extensions were sought for. So that is now over. Much of the backlog is over. Some cases people have confirmed mechanically because of the, trying to play safe and so on and so forth. So those issues remain.
So will you say then the tax policy is okay, or it has improved over a period of time? The systems are better than what they were earlier, but compliance gaps are still large, and the people are still not that don't have that ease of compliance which they should have.
Always when it comes to matters of parting with money, it's never easy to make people part with money to that extent. That is definitely there. And if you ask me whether it has been an excellent GST, my answer is no. But any GST would have been better than whatever we had earlier. At least today you have a uniform tax law. You have uniform tax rate across the country. You are entitled to far better and far better number of credits, amounts of credits. So the tendency to, bypass a lot of things, those kind of economic challenges have vanished automatically. Automatically. Humans have tried to fail us, like officers have tried to fail us. They could have been a little more careful, vigilant, facilitative. Those things haven't happened as much, particularly states who didn't have any experience of dealing with intangibles, which is services. So 82% of the demands in GST have come in the area of services, where people do not know. Goods, this is goods, this is the value of the goods, this is when it is cleared, this is moved from this territory to that territory. In services, all these issues people were not comfortable dealing with. So you have to rely on proxies, and that law was not known even to the central government officials who were largely dealing with customs or excise, which were goods-based taxation. Not everybody had experience with services. So more than 80% notices are in services.
But again, the question goes back, VK, that despite collections improving and growth figures are improving, or growth numbers are improving, the fiscal stress is persisting. The fiscal deficit, revenue deficits are persisting.
Yeah. So northern states have the stress. Northern states are particularly facing challenges. That could be one reason, particularly the state that we both come from, Punjab. Punjab is at the top of the ladder in terms of the fiscal stress. But if you go to the southern states, many of those states, they are done very well. Their fiscal deficits are quite less. You take, for example, Odisha, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, even Maharashtra, Gujarat. The problems are with states like Punjab, Bihar, West Bengal, Kerala, Rajasthan, West Bengal I've already named, Assam. And those are the states which are in very difficult stress. So the position is not uniform, not at all uniform.
No, but then if the position is not uniform, the contexts are not uniform, each state has its own structural issues in terms of financial sectors and economic sectors. Why is that we need to have a uniform text? Can't we have contextually relevant text policies and text structures? Whatever is more appropriate for northern states and whatever is more differently required for western and southern state, should we not be having different systems or different text structures for different states, which are locally or contextually relevant for the states in different parts of the country?
So the point that we have to notice is what was the tax structure prior to GST. For example, it takes state like Punjab. They were exporting their tax. Normally, indirect tax is never meant to be exported. They were fortunate to be able to export the levies on their agriculture produce. So they were levying close to 15% tax on wheat, rice, and those kind of a thing, which were going to the other states. And they were comfortably recovering that money. So that benefit, you can call it, and I would even call it, was not a very legitimate benefit that a state should have. They were able to exceptionally have it. Naturally, the deficit of Punjab is one of the highest for that reason. Other states had similarly origin-based levies. All those states that had origin-based levies have suffered in the GST. Whether you can do it in the revised scheme of things, constitutionally and other things, I have my doubts. Now, it's not possible unless you amend the constitution.
But that you would appreciate, since you and me know what was happening in Punjab. That was mainly because of structural. The levy of purchase tax, largely on the purchase of food grains, was something which was a major tax we were levying. Other little more tax on the rural development taxes and other taxes on the purchase of food grains. But that's only because it is getting transferred or exported to other states, because the government was buying all the procurements and government was paying the tax.
That's the reason.
It's a levy of purchase tax was not unconstitutional or not not permissible.
At that time, it was allowed. Purchase tax was permitted prior to 2017.
Legitimate levy. If the government of India wants to purchase some goods in bulk quantities and then wants to distribute it in other states, what was wrong with Punjab in doing that? So even if Punjab was collecting 10% or 15% taxes on the purchase and procurement of food grains, which large part of it was, why large? The total procurement was by the government. So government of India was paying taxes to Punjab in terms of purchase tax and other levies. But the fact remains that they were all legitimate levies. Now those legitimate levies have been denied to Punjab. And the context of Punjab is that other than the food grain produce, which gets about 150,000 crores every year, other than that, there's not much scope in Punjab to levy more taxes. And GST then becomes a kind of a loss-making proposition or damaging proposition for the state of Punjab. Similar maybe position in respect of other states in many other goods and services.
Look at it like this. Now, let's say the other states were also to levy export levies on their produce, which Punjab was to buy. What would be Punjab's reaction to that? Let's say Punjab doesn't have any number of produce, so that were to come from Gujarat. Gujarat will say, I'm going to levy the same levy. You can levy whatever taxes you want, but you can't force then somebody else that you must buy from me. Be in the open market.
But VK, I'll interrupt you. The capital goods which most of the Punjab trade and businesses buys from other states, particularly the western states, all the capital goods are taxed there, and then the tax-paid commodities and capital goods come to state of Punjab. It's not that the Punjab purchasers or Punjab buyers, whatever they buy from other states, comes tax-free. Nothing comes to us as tax-free.
No, Suresh, let me explain the scheme to you before GST. Before the scheme was, CST was an origin-based tax, and that used to be 2%. So if you were buying anything from other state and it was coming on CST, then that 2% or so was remaining with that particular origin state. In the case of Punjab, the levies were very high. They were not 2%.
Yes.
They were very high. And those states were not forcing you to buy those capital goods all the time. In the case of Punjab, we say not only we shall levy a purchase tax, you have to buy all our produce at the MSP and thrust this tax on the consuming states, and many of them are poorer states.
No, the position.
But anyway, all said and done, Punjab signed finally. They provided their consent. Today, the constitution stands amended.
No, that's true. I agree with you. The constitutional arrangement as it is today, it's applicable
Like if
to
Punjab
Punjab.
were to be a country, each state were to be a country, do you think Punjab would have been able to put these taxes on their exports? The answer is a
No,
definite no.
no.
Today, you don't have export taxes by and large on any produce.
Let's appreciate initially when the food procurement started, it was the compulsion of government of India to procure
Then it
food grains.
was. Then it was.
Then it was, and then it
Yeah.
was a kind of an opportunity for the state of Punjab to levy taxes
Yeah.
and collect some
Yes,
revenue.
yes.
Now that the
Absolutely.
government of India has many more options for procurement, government of India has many more produce coming in from, let's say, Madhya Pradesh and other states. Now they see that Punjab taxes are too high. Earlier they did not say this, but in the process, Punjab has lost an opportunity. Punjab doesn't have another chance or another opportunity to levy taxes on other produce and other goods.
Who stopped
Whereas
Punjab from making progress in other areas, services, industry, and all those kind of a thing? They didn't.
that's a
40, 50 years back economy. Anyway, we're getting into.
no, but that leads me to another thing, which is
Hmm.
normal. We've been talking about it earlier also. One of the reasons GST, particularly in Punjab and many other states which are agriculture based, and quite a bit of taxes were collected from the agriculture sector or agriculture produce, is that GST has kind of created a federal drift. It does not give enough space to the states for financial levies from taxes, and practically the states like Punjab or states like Haryana do not have much scope to levy any taxes. Even the fees and cesses and other duties which we were all those powers and things have been taken up or subsumed in the GST powers. So is it not against kind of economic or fiscal federalism? The space for fiscal federalism has squeezed after GST. This is what at least the feeling in Punjab is.
Because sometimes I get a feeling people want to have the cake and eat it too. Let's understand. First of all, between Punjab and Haryana at some point of time was a part of Punjab. Haryana is not facing the kind of fiscal stress that Punjab is facing. Because Haryana has diversified into industry and services much greater extent than Punjab has been able to do that. Two, no other power of taxation has been taken away in the revised constitution except entry fee, entry tax, and purchase tax. Entry tax, purchase tax, CST, and VAT or sales tax have all been put together. There are some minor levies. These have been put together. You have the powers to levy whatever petroleum taxes you wish to levy. You have the powers to levy taxes on for example, alcohol. You have the powers to do road tax, vehicle tax, even on transportation of goods and all these kind of things, stamp duties, registration fee, and nobody stops you from improving your NTRs, non-tax revenues. The only thing is, whatever you are collecting individually under your own individual law, you are today supposed to do it in a collaborative manner. And Constitution gives you the power to have different rates than the other states. People somehow believe that all rates, GST rates, have to be uniform. If you're not happy with an 18% rate, ask for a 20% rate. Ask for a 22% rate. There have been instances. Kerala, for example, at one point of time asked for an additional rate. I think they had some floods or the other, and GST Council allowed them. If somebody feels that a state is distressed and they need to tax their citizens more, Constitution allows it. It doesn't stop today. Punjab was having one of the highest VAT rates of India prior to GST.
Yeah.
One can go back to that rate. Why are people agreeing to, for example, all kind of tax rates have been brought down from 28% to 18%? Punjab's own rates were 28% plus excise from the center. Why has Punjab agreed to 9% today? You can still ask, I don't want to tax 9%, I'll be taxing at 11%. Constitution says so, that you can have a different rate than the rest of other states.
So, sir, theoretically, you're saying every state can petition to the GST
Council? Constitutionally.
And practically, how does it work?
Practically, it works that you have to make your case that yes, these are my positions and I may be allowed to go for a rate. Now take, for example, a Supreme Court judgment by the name Mohit Menwals. I think it came sometimes, which year, 4 or 5 years back, in which Supreme Court ended up giving a clarification, which is a very important one.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere the Constitution says, or the law says, state, at the recommendation of the council, state shall do this. Or state may do.
Then you don't agree that GST has centralized The tax
Centralized,
power.
yes. Centralized. Hai. Centralized does
Centralized.
not mean you have been left with nothing. Centralized mean, take for
Is there,
example,
is
European
there,
Union.
is there a way out to make GST more decentralized? Is there a way out to
What
concede
would you
some
mean? What would
space?
you like to do in
Space?
GST which you are not able to do today? Tell me that.
You see, you are saying the states can have their own rates. State can choose
No,
to
I'm not
have.
saying. Let me tell you what I want. First of all,
Hmm.
you have a uniform law. Do you want to have a different provision of law? You want to value goods differently? You want to classify goods differently? You want to have a different charging section? You want to penalize people differently? You want to adjudicate different cases differently? Because then what is ease of compliance? Why would anybody come to Punjab? Because you have to see, finally, India has to prosper. People as it is find India a very difficult place to do business.
But if the economic structures are the structure of
So I don't
states,
know. Nobody has suggested that I want a different provision of law. You want a different rate of law. Let's come to that now. If you feel that I want a different rate of tax.
Before we go to the rate, supposing the way economy of a particular state is structured, and that structural differences are structural
Allowed?
imperatives.
You are allowed today. You are allowed
No.
today. You want to exempt something, let's say, because of your structure. All that the council says is, please collect the tax and give it as a refund to the industry. You are allowed to give it.
Okay, my question is different. Council is saying let's not only have uniform rates, uniform laws, but we also have uniform rates. Invariably,
No. Second part is not correct. Second part is not correct. The council said for the first 5 years, we shall compensate you. Therefore, you need not have different rates. Please understand the point. 5 years, they assured you constitutional compensation. That if you fall short of a 14% CAGR growth, we shall compensate you. Why should a state have a higher rate when you can get the same money from the center?
Then you are conceding that different states can have different rates, and the law
provided in the
permits.
Constitution, Suresh. It is provided in the Constitution. I'm saying nothing new. Please read Article 279A. It says that the council can have a different rate for a state. This was a big issue because I used to be the joint secretary at that time. So initially, Mr. Chidambaram was the finance minister and he insisted on uniform rates.
Has any state made out a proposal for different rates?
It was allowed to Kerala. Actually allowed to Kerala when they had floods. So they said,
but was it just because of the natural
calamity
calamity that they allow it, and other states would still
the
not be able to
Constitution doesn't say these things. You can make a case that I'm resource crunch, this, that, etc. Please do that. You can have your own exemptions. I told you, you collect the tax and give it back to whosoever you want to give.
So why haven't other states gone for it, in your opinion?
Many states have gone for this. Many states are saying that we shall refund you the GST if you come and set up your factory here. Somebody says, I'll give you 100%. Somebody says this. Punjab also said so. We wrote the policy in 2017 or 18. We said if you set up a factory in Punjab, you will get a refund of IGST, SGST, in this manner. It is provided in the industrial policy of Punjab. But as a refund, please don't spoil the automated systems. Automated systems will catch the tax rates. Having got the tax, please give it as a refund.
Punjab and many other states' industrial policies provide for tax refunds, a zero rating, and whatever different ways.
Even during that day, interpretation also we said, Punjab can have its own interpretation of the same law. You feel I don't agree with the center. You please give your own clarification.
Can the states have their different rules under the GST law?
Rule has a very legal connotation. If you want to interpret a provision differently, you can give it interpretation that this is our interpretation.
I'm not even talking of different interpretations. I'm saying under the provisions for rule making powers, can states have their rules on their own? Can states have different rules than what is prescribed by Government of India?
But you have to first make a case. Which is the rule you want different? I want to understand which rule you want different and why do you want that different? Please give me an example.
I just want a fundamental provision in the basic provision in the law where state is empowered to make their own rules.
If that's okay, power but please tell me what is that rule which you want me to make different from what is provided? Rules are very innocuous things. There's nothing much in the rules. You go to the main statute.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. Suppose the state of Punjab wants to levy GST on purchase of food grains to be paid by the buyers, not by the sellers. Not by the producers.
Paid by the buyers. Buyers in other states or in your own state? You have no powers to tax the buyers of other states. You have the powers. Interstate tax is with the center. Please understand that point. IGST is a central levy.
Just bear me out. anyone who purchases agriculture goods or agriculture produce in the state of Punjab, should the state of Punjab or state of Haryana, for that matter, any other state, any goods purchase, should they not be having, because event of sales or purchase is happening in the state, should the state not be empowered to levy tax the way they want it?
So the question is twofold. You want to tax a person, seller is in Punjab, buyer is in Punjab, you are levying SGST. The seller is in Punjab, the buyer is in other state, the tax becomes IGST. IGST is a central tax. You have no powers of that. Earlier you had a power.
No, but the
That power
question
is
is,
constitutionally taken away now.
yeah, that is where the criticism or
No,
the
this is not a
critique
rule-making power. This is a constitutional power. That power is not.
earlier when interstate transactions were happening, interstate sales or purchase were happening, wherever they were happening, part of the tax, even the central sales tax, was retained by the state of origin or state of
Entire
place where
CST was retained by the state. Entire
Yeah.
CST was retained by the state, but CST tax rate used to be decided by the center. Central
okay.
sales tax, the money will remain with the state. Rate used to be decided by the center.
Correct.
Even today, Constitution says that interstate taxation will be with them.
No, the
Purchase
issue
tax was
is,
a aberration.
why the states were allowed to retain the CST revenue is because the transaction was happening in a particular state, and wherever the transaction of sales or purchase was happening, that state was allowed
So
to retain the revenue.
Suresh, we are
Today-
getting into a very different debate now, whether a country should have an origin-based taxation or a consumption-based taxation. These debates have happened over the last 100 years. There are reasons, good enough reasons, why taxation is done based on the place of consumption. You see, origin, if you take, for example, as I've been saying, if each state was a country, do you think Punjab would be finding it profitable to levy export taxes? Nobody will buy from Punjab. I will buy from abroad, or I will buy it from another state which doesn't levy export taxes. See, this was exactly the flaw. Punjab, sorry to say, was pampered on that extent, to a great extent, and that pampering has been taken away. They have to learn to stand on their own legs.
At a late stage, initially it was a compulsion of Government of India. Started it was a compulsion, and Punjab administration probably very wisely exploited that kind of a situation where the Government of India was compelled to buy the food grains from Punjab.
Naturally.
Punjab took advantage of that. Today, the Government of India doesn't need Punjab, so that's why Punjab becomes the villain of the story. Anyhow,
Absolutely.
that apart, but still is centralized.
I'll tell you the
GST.
centralization, where the problems are. See, it was thought to be an exercise in cooperative federalism.
Correct.
Now, if you take the constitutional design, the resolutions or the decisions of the council are supposed to be passed with the 3/4 majority. Center has 1/3 voting power. All the states put together have the 2/3 power, 66.67%. Now, what happens? All the states, if they join, they cannot pass a resolution. Center alone cannot pass a resolution. So literally, center has a vetoing power in all decisions of the council. So what happens when center wants something done, 33.33 is available. They require the remaining 42 out of the 67, which comes to something like a 62%. So particularly BJP has at all times had as many states. I think you require about 18 states out of 28 to get a resolution passed. So that way, GST levy and tax rates has become largely a central levy. There are very few instances where one state or two states or even 5 or 7 states wanted something done and they could get their way out. This was exactly the problem earlier because each state was trying to do things differently and India was a very difficult place. So every time India wanted to join a union, people will say, you are 28 states with 28 different tax regimes and tax laws and tax rates. Please become one. So in the interest of harmonization, people had to give up some amount of sovereignty. Center was to appoint a vice chairman of the council from amongst the state. Now today we are something like a 9th year of the GST or 8th year of the GST. They haven't still appointed any state finance minister as the vice chairperson. They were to provide a dispute resolution authority. I remember when I was serving Punjab, we had a dispute. We wanted compensation to be given to us fast. And then council decided, no, there shall not be a dispute settlement authority and you have to come to the same council only. So all these things have made GST center-oriented tax. That definitely has happened. And to that extent, there's a disappointment. If a state wants to place something on the agenda, the center may or not may place it. Unfortunately, state officers have refused to join the council. They were deputation positions. They should have gone into the council. Nobody found it good enough position to be there. So the entire staff of the council or their secretariat has moved into the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. So central officers are making the policy documents. These are areas which states should get alerted and then say, no, the secretariat will look into the proposals and their officials can also be there. Except the additional secretary to the, yeah.
Just to conclude on GST and move on to other things, what would you suggest to simplify, to make the tax more taxpayer friendly or more state friendly, particularly when it comes to GST administration, GST provision, GST, major allegation of centralization, major allegation by the taxpayers that compliance burden remains as high or as it was in the VAT, sales tax or earlier tax regimes. So what would you suggest? What can be the major changes or major reforms in GST that can simplify it further, if at all we consider it simple?
Okay, GST का जो soul है ना, the real soul and spirit of a GST is the input tax credits. It's a value-added tax. Now, the more you block it, it becomes like a bad cholesterol. The first thing in any VAT system should be that there should be no bad cholesterol. Unfortunately, this GST has considerable bad cholesterol. For example, we say telecom, we shall not give credits of towers, and Supreme Court has struck it down in a certain context. We shall not give credits of pipelines for the gas transportation industry. And there are lots of such things where the credits are, for example, not being given. So that is the first thing. Tax harmonization government has done in 2017. Personally, I would have liked the low rate to be higher than 5%. 5% doesn't really give you any effective tax because credits are close to 4%. So even if that was done 6%, the revenue from the low tax rated items would have doubled from that point of view. So states have got a very big hit on revenues because the low rate is 5% and a large number of commodities that were earlier getting taxed at 12% are now getting taxed at 5%. Similarly, when tax rate is brought down from 28 to 18, and 28% are all those commodities in states were levying 14 or 14.5% VAT. Center was levying about 12.5% of excise. There was 2% CST. Now all those have been now brought down to 18%. Now in 18, 14 was credit. So when the final rate was 28, you are getting 14 as revenue. With 18 as a rate, you only get 4 as a revenue. Your hit is 70%. Your hit is not as it appears to be that you're going to get 18 by 28. You are going to get 4 by 14. Credit services have remained at 18. Now, these are the areas in which states are going to have a huge impact on their revenues. Unfortunately, these rates were brought down unanimously. States also have to take a blame. There are 1 or 2 states who spoke, but finally the resolution was passed because they were trying to be populist. The rates are being reduced. They say, why should we say so? And there was no compensation. Center waited for the compensation period to end and then brought down these rates. But you don't worry. States still get 57% of all revenues of India. Center continues to get 43. And this ratio has only improved in favor of the states. The ratio has not deteriorated for the states. Over the last, if you take 20 years, this ratio is in favor of the states. Even when you are getting 14% GST, center was very smartly not giving you something else. See, they will give you by one hand, take away from the other, and vice versa also. For example, when they started giving you, compensating more you for the GST, they increase the taxation on petroleum by way of cesses, which are not supposed to be shared by the state with the states.
Correct.
So sum total of the story was states ultimately ended up getting, in my personal view, close to only 10% growth and not 14% growth. You got 14% technically, but somewhere else you started losing. Center has too many levers in their hands.
But should we remain hopeful of GST becoming more simple, more easy, more user-friendly?
Yes. Yeah. The GST, see, we opened too many fronts, particularly the technology. As somebody told me, in the case of GST, politicians behaved the best, bureaucrats were the next, and industry failed. Because Infosys failed, according to a lot of people, in a big way, technology. Politicians said, okay, you want to do whatever you wish to do, please go ahead. We are supporting you. There were no objections. Initial meetings, if you take 16, 17, there were full consensus. Nobody was objecting to anything until they found that the officers began failing and many of the issues started becoming politically sensitive issues. Somebody thought, I'm going to lose this election, that election, etc., etc. Then they took things in their hands. Then, for example, your initial exemption for this composition scheme, which you could clear things on paying some 1%, the limit was 50 lakhs. They increased it to 1.5 crores. Today, your entire distribution chain is outside the GST. According to me, some 50% of the economic activity of the country is not practically into value-added part of the GST. Land, labor, buildings, alcohol, petroleum is as it is out. Restaurants, you pay 5%, you don't take credits. Residential construction, you pay 5%, you don't get credits. This even good hotels, 4-star or maybe 5-star also, whose tariff is below 7,500, you get 5% without credits. If you don't get credit, it is not effectively a value-added tax. And all the advantages of value-added tax in terms of self-policing, in terms of so many other things, are to that extent gone. So these are the design defects. For example, we have taxed the factors of production. You buy land, there is no GST. You hire land, you pay 18%. I employ labor, there is no GST. I take outsourced labor, I pay 18%. What is this? Now you want to shift, let's say, from China to India, manufacturing plant. You will immediately say, now you may not buy land. You may not get land at a strategic location. You tell somebody to pay. He gets 18%, and that may not be eligible to you as tax credit also. You start manufacturing an exempted product in India. You hire labor. You say, I have too many complicated laws. I don't want to comply with the labor laws. I'm going to hire labor. Let somebody else be responsible. You pay 18%, that burden gets added to you. So it is not a law designed by an economist, but designed by people who are tax officials.
VK, but will you not agree? Most states conceded or agreed, whichever way, and so-called consensus got built up because the way you are explaining the implications of various tax provisions and various, particularly the implications of input tax credits, these things most states were not aware, are still not aware. And the kind of awareness, the kind of capacity should have been created in the state administration, the state tax administration, that was never attempted. And states are, even today, with all responsibility, I can say that many states do not have the kind of knowledge, information, and capacity they should have in better administration of the GST. And that's where, once they could understand these implications, the way ITC is going to impact them, where reduction or increase in taxes could impact them, then only they can probably agree, disagree, or come to a safer conclusion when it comes to fiscal federalism.
A good point there, but states should also have been humble. Many of them thought they know everything until they were caught napping. How do you tell somebody who thinks that I know everything कि तू और सीख ले भाई थोड़ा सा? वो तो center also didn't know so many things. See, people are enforcers of tax most of the time. People were not having an economist's viewpoint. You needed people who had a legal background, who had an international global trade background, people who had an economics background, people who had a public finance background. This law was only done by a bunch of officers all the time. There were no consultations with the industry. I remember when the first draft came and suggestions were sent, there were 50,000 representations that were sent, all hurriedly done. Somebody had to accept. Somebody suddenly decided constitution, all provisions will come into effect by this date. And then they were racing against time. You were to make each of the constitution, you could have made each of the constitutional provision enforceable from different dates. Deadline fix ho gayi. 1st September is the last date by which GST must come. There are lots of errors, blunders, one after another. GST जैसे constitution design हुआ. The then additional secretary forgot to omit certain laws. I rushed to the North Block and told कि भाई ये तो 2014, so these were meant to be omitted. They are still there. वो story तो किसी दिन और कि blunder bureaucracy ने.
Is it political blunder or it is a bureaucratic blunder? Maybe
politicians
the will of the politicians that those
all kind of mini battles being fought in the North Block. But those are unfortunate past of India's policy making. Tell me, in which country do people make such important laws without involving anybody from industry? But
do you think experts were involved? Or it's so purely a bureaucratic?
Not at all. Even till today. Let's understand, this is a reality of the way country works. And maybe other country also works in similar way. That's a larger issue. That's not a tax issue. That's a human attitude issue.
across other policies as well.
You take, for example, what you call these OECD countries. I have attended some of their meetings. They will say, okay, everybody's invited. You will see a representative from Microsoft. They'll see a representative from Coke. They're sitting. They'll make their observations. You may enact your laws the way you want.
So VK has raised a larger issue of politics of policy making.
Yeah.
And the way policies across centers are made in this country, wherever the expert opinions, consultations are required, the stakeholders consultations are required, those are not adequate, and the processes of policy making are not participatory. And
Yep.
this is what probably has happened in the case of GST or the tax policies also. But moving away, VK, now issue you said compliance burden is not as much as it was earlier in the earlier taxes and sales tax and VAT and whatnot. But one issue which comes up very often whenever we discuss any tax administration, tax compliance, tax burdens, it is the tax terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
People do complain that even with the advent of technology, introduction, infusion of technology, artificial intelligence, the terrorism or tax surveillance has increased, and so much so that people are really fearful of the tax enforcing agencies, enforcement agencies, be that the agencies, the direct tax laws, income tax, or be that the agencies of central excise, central customs, and other things. Do you think tax policies need to be reformed, maybe more simplified, maybe made more taxpayer friendly, to see that at least the taxpayer, the genuine taxpayer, is not harassed in any way?
Yeah, this I would say should be the number one priority for anybody concerned with the tax policy. Earlier, 10 years back, I used to hear the term tax terrorism. Last 4 or 5 years, I've started hearing the term now tax jihad. My people, now there are 25 lakh show cause notices on GST, of which most likely my estimate is 99% will be bogus. All kind of harassment has started happening. People take extreme interpretations. You ask the tax department, should I do A or B? Now, if he says, I don't want to tell you, you do A, he will say B is the interpretation. You do B, he say A is the interpretation. Nobody wishes to clarify. Such a huge tax has been introduced, despite best intentions at the very top. Lately, I think this realization has reached the very top. I can see there are many visible signals of, one can even call a sense of frustration at the very high levels. And they are trying to mend by taking some kind of action or to making organizational changes at the very top in tax departments. But unfortunately, this tax has been jointly implemented by the center and states. All states are not uniform. So center alone cannot do many times, everything. And then many of the enforcement measures were very retrograde, particularly things like e-way bill, that is physical monitoring of each vehicle, which was okay in the state VAT system. Now you are in digital age, and each invoice can be verified in so many other ways. So you stop a truck, you ask this document, that document, and naturally these all things, they lead to rent-seeking behavior. So one good measure that will give you an indication of how bad things are, the following. If, let's say, you pick up the top 20 balance sheets of the top companies of India, there will be a column that we have received notices of this amount, and we have provided a provision of so much. So what is the ratio of provisioning to the demands given? Now, this could be as little as 1%. So if the corporate sector in India is taking the demands with seriousness of 1% fructifying, that is one indicator that what extent of tax harassment is going on. Infosys was given a notice of 35,000 crores, and then things reached up to the very highest levels, and then finally it was dropped. I'm aware of so many such show cause notices, and not by a local state or something like that. This was given by the highest investigating body of the government of India, the Director General of Intelligence, which is the equivalent of CBI or GST matters. So this is an area of concern, and I think they should say notices above a certain amount, let's say 100 crores or 500 crores, at least 1,000 crores of certain types should not be issued unless they have received the approval of a body which Government of India should urgently create. because courts and tribunals are not there. By then, a lot of damage is done. If your balance sheet is spoiled today, that I have to report that okay, I've got demands of so much, I cannot sell my business to anybody. People won't invest in my business. Not every business is. People look for all kind of resources to expand and so on and so forth. This is the collateral damage that gets done when you start getting the bogus thing.
Yeah.
International MNCs are not used to getting these notices. Their top executives get really scared. Ki kya ho gaya bhai? Then you tell him you can be arrested, penalty, this and that. Clauses are very, they sound very dangerous.
Mhm.
So many of these things, they require the attention of those who have actually dealt how businesses are brought into a country. I
Yeah.
think this is
But
very
do you
important.
think these discrepancies are pointed out in a routine clerical or bureaucratic levels, or these are probably motivated by at the levels of you said at the highest level, maybe at political levels in the government, so that they want to harass or not to harass a particular business, trade, a particular company, a particular taxpayer. Otherwise, a notice such as 35,000 crore to Infosys. I mean, Infosys is known; they have offshore businesses, they have business across countries, and if a company like this, which does so much good for the country in terms of digital services and services export they do. So if those companies are giving notices and if there's no agency to scrutinize to take a call whether a notice should go or not, do you think this is being done in a routine clerical way? I have a feeling that these are not routine clerical or bureaucratic decisions or bureaucratic actions. Probably something more is happening and something more is expected, and that's the reason probably these notices go out so often and so soon.
We know from the Infosys case specifically that the top intervened not to issue the show cause. So this was definitely not a case which was prompted by the politicians. In my long career in the tax department, I rarely saw any top person trying to tell you that give such person a bogus notice. I never really saw. The problem that I saw was many times, and particularly I was in the ministry as joint secretary, very heavy demands people will write from the field that I wish to give this demand. And the chairman will tell me, VK, is he technically right? Now I am taking some credit. I had the courage to say, no, this is bogus. So many times we held even discussions in the room of the finance minister. Other ministers were coming, this is being done. I will say this is a bogus demand, sir. So we could intervene. You have to have the courage to say it is bogus and defend that position. Unfortunately, that kind of people don't exist. Today, if a person at the lowest level says something, I don't see people in the system who have the courage to overrule him on file. Inquiry ho jayegi, this thing, that thing, that thing. Let him go to the court or tribunal. So we lack people who know the subject and who have the courage of convictions. This is a fundamental flaw, and these things can't be brought by changing a law or making a rule. They require character of another kind. Whether
So
this
don't,
can be handled through technology or some other method, checks and balances, is another moot point. We can argue on that.
do you think technologies and other options,
Yes, technology is a very good option. For example, you
technically
say,
available?
now to take for example, AI is being used for litigation purposes, despite, and there are serious objections from the judges. One of the suggestions we have given to the ministry is that a show cause must get a certain rating from the AI. When you put a show cause into an AI, yeah, we'll say this is completely bogus, so the probability of it succeeding is less than 5%. Then that show cause should automatically refer to a directorate, which has good lawyers and people with competent knowledge.
Sure.
You can have AI, for example, to give you automatic stay orders. That okay, this is a show cause, okay, given we'll decide it, but for the time being, there'll be no impact on the no pre-deposit, nothing of the kind, no precipitated action would be taken. So some of these technology solutions will come as humans deteriorate in competence or character.
And do you think
But do
that
you
overall at the top there would be sufficient agreement to implement such AI-based algorithms
I
where the
think
show
so.
cause
I
can be
think so.
stopped?
I haven't seen in the last, let's say, 8 or 9 years of GST, any of the persons at the very top who was not seriously, first of all, aware of the problem or didn't want to resolve it. Many times, I think their access to constructive feedback and implementable feedback was probably not there. They were surrounded too much by the standard bureaucracy. You have to travel beyond that to understand how to cut the red tapeism, how to find out of the box solutions, and so on and so forth. That, in my personal view, has been lacking in the last few years.
But if
Very
that is lacking, VK, and still people use their discretion or people use whatever space they have, whatever space has been conceded to them. Do you think there's hope for tax reform, further tax reforms, making the tax burden come down? And
Let's say, for example, income tax has faceless assessments. You ask typically, and let's say an income tax official, he'll say we are feeling powerless now. So large number of refunds people you ask, they say we got the refund within a few days of filing a return. These are all the positive feedbacks you'll get.
but
All of us have.
what you're saying is endorsed and reinforced by one of my colleagues in the income tax department. I mean, our batchmates, who's of course now retired. He said with the faceless assessments and faceless kind of processes which have been introduced in income tax department, the manual interventions have increased by way of increased number of tax evasion petitions, tax TEPs. And as you said, not more than 5%, maybe not more than 3% TEPs are genuine TEPs, and all kinds of bogus TEPs are kind of taken on record. And to convert the faceless process into more manual intervention, and wherever the TEP is there, the discretion lies with the officers that they can issue notices and call for the give notices and summon the people and try and start the proceedings, inspections, and whatnot. And invariably, and his experience, he was in investigation and inspection departments or wings of the income tax, and he said invariably those TEPs, 9 out of 10 TEPs failed. And so that means the bureaucracy or the officers, the tax bureaucracy is innovating and trying to bypass the faceless or systemic reforms which have been introduced over the last few years.
No, those things are still there, but these things are improving now. A lot of things are recorded, for example, when the hearings are done. So technology is a wonderful solution, and the state should also go for faceless GST, in my personal view. Many states are resisting this, but time is not far when even GST assessments and scrutiny or adjudications will become faceless. We didn't have a GST tribunal till practically now, 8 or 9 years. So once you start getting judgments on, people will have precedents how to decide or not to decide things in a particular way. So all these things are waiting to happen. It may take another 3 to 5 years on that front. But not everything of the tax department has been towards terrorism. Policy level, a lot of reform has been done.
Moving further, VK, how would you compare or rate our Indian tax system, the tax system prevailing both direct and indirect taxes in our country, compare it with the other countries, particularly in Europe and America, where GST has been there for a long time, where direct taxes, particularly the personal income tax, is much more simpler than what we see in our country. So, how do you compare the systems which prevails in our country and maybe most of the other countries which have a better systems? A so-called
The
better system.
GST, I'm forgetting the name of the author who said there are three systems: good, bad, ugly. He never gave very good to anyone. So good system, according to him, was New Zealand. Bad was Europe, and Brazil was ugly at that time. And New Zealand, the beauty of the New Zealand system was their finance minister said, I'm not going to distinguish between an Apple or a McDonald's. He taxed practically everything. So when I visited New Zealand, I was told even on cremation or burial services, there was a GST. हमारे यहाँ तो लोग बहुत sensitive हो जाते. Only there were 4 exemptions and on legitimate grounds, and everything else was taxed. So naturally, when you tax everything, tax rates are very low, full credits are being given, a lot of automatic advantages follow. Europe had a different problem. Europe brought their VAT system from 1952, then they brought this 1976 or 1977 by the directives. Each country tried to maintain their own individuality to a certain extent. So whatever exemptions they had, they retained that. Their idea was, let's try to have a similar language. It's not identical language. So Europe will say, you achieve this purpose, you can choose your language. And then some amount of harmonization happened. So their idea was to be able to become aware what is the extent of levy at the final stage. Now, Brazil's situation was something similar to India. They also did it. And then it got into all kind of problems. Now, this is not an easy reform. Canada tried to do it, and Canada had to kind of retrace back in at least one of their provinces, I think British Columbia. because people thought that rates of services had gone up, which included restaurants and those kind of things. So, with all the limitations that we have in the existing GST, my assessment is it's not definitely not a terrible GST. It's not even a bad GST. It's a decent effort for a country as diverse as India, which has moved ahead. USA could not do it so far. And whether they require they need to have it is a different point. China has not been able to do it. The large economies, many countries have not been doing. Many countries are trying to study the Indian pattern. And there are so many positives in our GST that we have been able to do. Some of the initial flaws, we have plugged them by now. And I get it, particularly after the rate harmonization last year. I'm only saying rates are lower. The lower rate from 5% could have been 6, 7, or 8. That can always be done. But the basic design is now getting to fall into a place. In terms of the direct taxation, corporate taxation particularly, I think our rates are now much more reasonable than ever in the past. Personal income tax, now last year we gave the exemption up to 12 lakhs for defined incomes except the business income. Salary will get another 75,000, which is very high. If you take a country where the per capita income is, let's say, some $3,000 or so, to have 5 times of that as the basic threshold income is a very, very bold step. So not many people are going to be into the tax net for that purpose. And we are eliminating exemptions in the run up to this kind of a thing. So at the design level, things are changing. In terms of implementation, things are changing. But country doesn't have a culture of compliance. वो चलता है कि भाई कोई भी है फैसला we will be able to manage somehow. This too much emphasis on this managing things is not very conducive to a proper tax system. Naturally, if that is the culture at the other side, then you can't expect the tax officers also to be at times, far more, what should I say, extreme in implementation and unreasonable in implementation. So this struggle goes on. But if you see over 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, one would get a sense that we are far better off than what we were that many decades back.
You just referred to US, and Arpit is right now in US only. He's sitting in Cornell, and I returned yesterday. USA, both direct and indirect taxes are state specific. The rates are state specific. California is on the higher side. New York is lower. Other states, there are states even which have kind of a zero tax on a particular commodity, while others have
40% tax, I think US will have. Rate is very high.
somewhere it's very high, somewhere it's very low. So each state has a different tax rates and different tax structures. Structures are common, but tax rates are different. Do you think there is a case for having different tax rates if the states want to? And that will probably, you see, I asked this question in the Fresno University to some of the colleagues and Punjab-based people who are teaching in the Fresno University as professors. Someone is a professor of economics and somebody is professor of agriculture science and things like that. They said there are two things which are two factors are very, very important. One is the growth varies from each state. Growth is different. California is more agriculture based, growth rates are different, growth imperatives are different. New York is more commercial trade based. Chicago and Ohio, that side, Michigan are more industry manufacturing based. So their growth imperatives are different. So they need different kind of tax rates. Second, they say the income levels vary from state to state. Both the GDP and the per capita income, they vary from state to state. That's why the people who have higher income levels should be taxed more. The states where people have lesser income, both the corporate income or business income as well as the personal income, where the income levels are low, the per capita and both the business incomes are on the lower side, their tax rate should be lesser because they want to leave more spending money with the taxpayers, with the consumers. Now, do you think that should be the case, that the tax rates particularly should be linked with the growth and growth imperatives, the existing growth patterns and growth rates, and the income levels in various states in India?
Income tax is a tax primarily to kind of equalize the income disparities amongst the people of that state. Now, one can make a case for a decentralized income tax in a country where the constitutional design is such. Now, I may be a little biased, but my understanding is that states' finances have been over the years far more. What should I use the word carefully? Uh, Even irresponsible in many ways. A lot of states have gone to a position where it's dangerous. How will they even survive? And states openly say center apne now to hand over such states tax like income tax. It's like allowing a very weak state some kind of a nuclear button or something of that kind. It's not. It's a very dangerous trend. People, income tax is very critical to attract FDIs. People take very important calls that how exactly we have to do that. So there is probably a reason that India has adopted a far more centrist approach than a country like USA, which is a far more mature and developed economy, where you could give greater powers. Within a family also, we give greater power to our children when we feel that they have become mature and grown-ups. And when they are into less trustworthy activities, we try to contain their pocket expenses. We apply some checks and balances. So this is a very delicate balance that people have to, achieve.
But that's what is called as big brother attitude.
No.
The center,
Finally,
the
the money belongs to
government-
the people of India. It doesn't make a difference whether it is collected by state individually or the center gives it back to the states. See, today you get 41% devolution. It's just a question of collection. So who is in a better position to collect it? Now, take for example a corporate registered offices, let's say in Bombay. They are spread all over the country. You want to collect it 28 times? You want to collect once? Because the balance sheet is one. So how would you divide? Then you will ask that person, "Abhi bhi ho raha GST mein dijiye." Now there is no concept of a jurisdictional trial balance in accounts. Audit मैं करूँ भाई मेरी balance sheet है. Then he says reconcile the figures in the state trial balance with your balance sheet. No, balance sheet is national. It may even have international activities.
But VK, aren't you missing on the politics of fund transfer, the politics of
I'm
tax
not into the
sharing?
politics. So politics should be outside taxation, even within a state. A CM is very careful in
Be
putting the
outside,
best
but
officer in charge of the tax.
politics is
के
always
साथ
the
politics खेलेंगे,
constitution.
state country finished है. Problem है, देश is already fiscally stressed a lot. Our tax to GDP today is 85%. Should have been 60%.
Correct.
And there are states like Punjab, for example, which are touching 50% of the GDP. They should be 20, 25, double. And
But
they are
how
spending
do we
only
avoid?
0. capex.
But
वो तो
VK,
आप
I didn't
देखिए
want
और
I didn't
dangerous
want to
है.
use this term. I didn't want to use this term because it is used more on the political forums. But the so-called slogan of this double engine sarkar, don't
नहीं
you
कह रहा
think
double
double
engine
engine
रखो. I'm not saying
is a
double engine.
politics?
No. Double engine है. There is a constitutional design. You have your own power. They have their own powers. Which double engine sarkar can say? Nobody has ever given.
Politics, some
You
politics
can
is
have a few more projects in a state. There is a finance commission which decides horizontal and vertical distribution of money. And you have been
So you
told
think
57% पैसे आपके हैं states के. And 57, whether it is this government, that government has remained largely constant or it has improved in favor of the state. को पैसे ही नहीं मिले. The pleasure of collecting a tax is different from getting a tax. And the pleasure
but
of collecting a tax is a very dangerous thing. Pleasure comes with a lot of responsibility, which a state may or may not be able to discharge, considering the compulsions of local politics being far, far more than the politics at the center.
But moving away from the constitutionally mandated tax transfers or the revenue transfers or the fund transfers from the center to states, the union to the states, there are other central funds, central kitty, central project, central sector schemes where the fund transfer is largely regulated by the party in power, the ethos, the working styles, the preferences, or the priorities of party in power at the central level. Don't you think that is something which is causing a lot of concern in the states?
It's always there, Suresh, but look at it. For example, today, if you talk the latest things, a lot of industrial activity is moving into the state of Andhra Pradesh.
Yes.
It is not moving into Bihar, who is also supporting this government at the center. Now, Google's, Reliance, Adani, you think of a person, large projects of 1 lakh crores, etc., are going there. Whatever be the political reasons of this, you also see the administrative reasons behind them. How exactly they treat industry in those states. Why is the industry moved over the last 30, 40 years into, let's say, Gujarat? At that time, the then incumbent, who's the present prime minister, he was in the opposite state. and they were able to grow. Maharashtra, which has grown. Karnataka. You take, for example, Tamil Nadu, which has always been between two parties
Mhm.
who are never fully aligned with the center. How beautifully has Tamil Nadu grown? So double engine sarkars have not necessarily done well. There is all said and done. Leave aside this noise that goes around, politically. Finally, most states have got their dues. Now you take, for example, the latest award. Which are the states which are the maximum beneficiary of the 16th Finance Commission? They are not double engine sarkars.
So, just to bring it to a bit of a conclusion, if you were to see the trajectory of how GST and the overall tax regime is to shape in the future realistically, what would be your broad estimate?
So how will they grow, or how I would like to see it, for example,
If you
grow?
could tell us both.
How I would like to see it grow is that, I don't know. Ideally, I feel there should be only one tax in India. Now,
Okay.
if you take, for example, income tax is a tax on the bottom line, on the
Mhm.
profits.
Yeah.
GST is a tax on profits plus employed labor plus finance costs.
Yeah.
As I used to say, that GST is a tax on double the value at half the rate. See, the average GST in India today is about 15%, and income tax used to be about 30.
Yeah.
So PBT plus finance plus, let's say, what is it, labor cost is the tax they charge it
Yeah.
on that front.
Yeah.
There is no reason why we need to have all the provisions different. You have a transfer pricing provision in income tax in one way, and the same transfer pricing in customs in another way.
Mhm.
Custom is a tax on cross borders, and we used to believe it is always in the course of international trade. It is no more in the course of international trade. Today, you can have a bonded area, a special economic zone, and manufacturing bond and so on. So you are clearing manufacturing in India, clearing within India, and still you have a customs duty.
Yeah.
Similarly, GST is a tax largely on sale or supply.
Yeah.
So you could have one law in which you could say this chapter shall exclusively apply to direct tax. This chapter shall exclusively apply to sales, customs. All other chapters are common. Why do you need to have different interest rates for delayed payment of tax?
Yeah.
Why do you have to have different penalties for the enforcement of taxes? One tax is being collected even today with COFE POSA and preventive detention. Some taxes don't even have the provisions of arrest and so on and so forth. Why do you want to have so much of paraphernalia? Why do you have so many officers all together? So have one broad design of a tax,
Yes.
and then tell the states you can implement it the way you want within the federal economy. Now, one state wants to increase the taxes. Now, people taxes also move. People exploit the tax arbitrage. If my petroleum taxes in Punjab are higher, people will get the petrol filled either from Himachal or from Jammu or Rajasthan or Haryana or somewhere else. The tax will
Yes.
pass through the state. Similarly, alcohol. So some of these basic harmonization is required to be done. That will be good for everybody. Now, Suresh has been saying, no, I want federal autonomy more important than the optimization or betterment of tax collections. I would say you enjoy autonomy in area where autonomy is important, but come to harmonization, where harmonization will give you much better results with far lesser efforts. There are too many tax officers, accountants, and chartered accountants floating around in the country. That's not a good sign. In any good system, these are unproductive capacities that we have created. So that is the one kind of a thing. So one statute largely harmonized, and then you decentralize to the extent that you need to do. Remove the direct taxation portion in an indirect tax. Now we say GST is an indirect tax. Now please ask me, which are the portions of GST which are direct tax? They are the problem creator. They lead to corruption. They lead to evasion. They lead to audits. When you don't give me the credit, it becomes a cost to me. Method ढूंढता हूं कि भाई this is going to eat into my profits.
Yeah.
So I will do something to overcome that. The moment I do, there'll be somebody wanting to catch me. There is somebody who will be seeking rent from me. So the entire behavior gets distorted because I have given an indirect tax the color of a direct tax.
Yeah.
Otherwise, indirect tax means what? I'm an agent of collection for you.
Exactly. Why should it even?
Taxpayer, I hand it over to the government. Why is
Yeah.
the government trying to deny me? Why do you want to distinguish? We had a situation when the GST came in. I gave this example in the council कि भाई आप मेरा 5% रेट है, जीरो कर चॉकलेट डाल दी, चॉकलेट की जीरो हो, स्टैचू वुड का स्टैचू है तो एक है, मार्बल का स्टैचू है, ग्लास का है और है, गोल्ड का है, सिल्वर का है, किसी और मेटल का है. So we had all kind of funny rates. It was a crazy implementation of the law. Well, I would like to say you have a harmonized system of nomenclature. No chapter can have more than 2 rates. You can't have so many rates everywhere.
Yeah.
आपने distinction कर, I'm not in favor of very high rates. वो income tax से आप handle कीजिए. So this is
Correct.
my broad thing. Secondly, use technology in a very big way.
Yeah.
Very big. India is becoming too complex, and people at the lower levels, there has never been an Inspector Raj of this magnitude as we are seeing it today. And I made an admission that tax terrorism is very high and we need to contain it and send a message. No notice above a certain magnitude would be issued to a taxpayer unless it has been double validated by a directorate which will take the responsibility and that kind of things. I think otherwise, broadly, these are the things. And customs tariff in times to come are going to become more and more difficult to implement.
Yeah.
And they are becoming tools for weaponization and all kind of different negotiations. So that's a different game.
That's your realistic assessment on where it'll go.
It was already going on. Now it has come too much into focus. It has moved out of the prerogative of the Ministry of Finance to, I think, even MEA and commerce. And these are the changes that are happening on that front.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think we have to start preparing for the economy of the future, because if we will say in next 3 to 5 years, economies are going to undergo massive changes. And that subject we haven't discussed today. I get a feeling that taxes will move away from taxation of labor, which is personal income tax, to consumptions or taxation of productive capacities. So there we must streamline digital assets, digital supply of services, taxation of import of services, because today only goods get taxed in the context of cross-border, and no country is by and large taxing services. When 70%, 80% of the economy is becoming service specific, we have to start thinking, how do we bring that into the tax nut? So those things are not at all being thought of today.
Yeah.
These are some of the broad ideas. I would also grant Suresh this point that states need to be treated with far greater respect, and they need to be listened to and not ignored, and supported in both resources, in design, how exactly they can improve their designs, and harmonization in smaller brackets on a zonal basis. A set of 5-6 states which surround each other or come close to each other can harmonize their laws while retaining essential freedom. Even within GST, I think the CBIC should be detached from the council. There should be a formal secretariat. Now, you take, for example, any international organization, WTO, there is a secretariat supporting it. United Nations, there is a secretariat supporting it. That secretariat should become autonomous, independent in that sense, and bring proposals which don't favor either the center or the state, and seen that way. That will give credibility that our tax is truly a tax of cooperative federalism.
Yeah.
But do you think our politicians who are in power will, at any point of time, maybe later in any years, and maybe 10 years from now, will concede that kind of a thing to have an autonomous secretariat, autonomous decision making on tax system, on finances?
India is hoping to get Security Council seat. So because initial years we used to make this point, and Punjab was about to be appointed the vice chairperson. In fact, we were sounded by the then finance minister that should you be made the vice chairperson of the council. But later on, it became more and more difficult. It is there in the constitution. So you have to make a case that, yes, why has this not been done for 8 years? Nobody gives you unless you at least make a demand. There is a dispute resolution mechanism provided in the constitution. Why did you provide if it was never to be operationalized? You can have a thing. For example, you ask that I want 2% additional GST on this thing, and it's your rate. You can have an SGST of 11%. Center can continue to have 9%. Same law gives you change the system in your state, you get 11%. And the council doesn't allow you. You can go to the dispute resolution authority. My deficit is so high. My people are starving. I need this money. What's wrong with that? That dispute resolution authority will give you the latitude. Please go ahead. What's wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong. Constitution provide, dispute resolution is provided in the constitution. State should ask. You want to give a different clarification. You want to interpret tax your way. Why not you do that? As it is.
But why do you think states are not doing it?
When I was there, in fact, I asked the commissioner, कि तू 2-3 clarification, you give it different from what the TRU has given. At least assert your authority and give it proper, not because you want to differ. you generally feel that this provision should be interpreted in a manner different from theirs. In the entire law, I can tell you at least the interpretation power is fully with the state. No provision of the law I'm aware of where you are bound by a clarification only after council approves. Law you cannot make. Law may be ye hai on the recommendation. You make me a recommendation, I may listen to you, I may not listen to you. It is not a directive. You are not allowed to give me a directive. You are allowed to give me a recommendation. So these are matters of interpretation. So in that judgment, which I was quoting Mohit Minwal's, Supreme Court said so, that it is not binding on you. And then the council meeting, they got alarmed that if this starts happening, states will go haywire. So they gave some clarification or the other from the Attorney General, which is not binding on you.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. I think we'll have to invite you once again because there's just too much to unpack on taxes. And as they evolve, we'd love to have you back again. But thank you so much for this very interesting deep dive into the tax system.